Begin your interfaced cuff sample by drawing two rectangles that are 2.5 inches by 8 inches roughly. It's okay if they're a little bit larger or a little bit smaller. We're just trying to roughly get the shape and size of a cuff for some kind of human. Next, you're going to cut out those two rectangles in your cotton woven fabric. Next, you're going to locate a piece of fusible non-woven interfacing in either light or medium weight. You're going to cut out a piece of the interfacing that is roughly the same size as your cuff sample. However, it can be slightly smaller. It will be important to know that there can be knit, woven, or non-woven interfacing, and it can be fusible or non-fusible. Next, you compress your two rectangles of fabric and set one aside. Then you're going to get a press cloth. This can be any scrap of fabric that you don't mind destroying in the instance that the fusible part of the interfacing, the glue side, comes off onto the iron or the tablecloth. You'll be able to identify which side is fusible and which side is not fusible by the way it feels. The bumpy side must go down onto the fabric. That's where the little glue dots are. Next, you will cover up both sides of the fabric with the press cloth, and you're going to press down to fuse the piece of interfacing onto your fabric. You do this by just pressing the iron down, and then you can ensure that it's not going to come off, and you've got a piece of fused fabric. Next, at your sewing machine, you're going to put right sides together of your two pieces of fabric, one that has the fusible interfacing, one that does not. And using 1/4 inch of seam allowance, you're going to begin with a back stitch and stitch all the way around the 3 edges of this cuff, stopping at about 1/4 inch. Now, if it's difficult for you to eyeball where that 1/4 inch is, feel free to use a piece of chalk before you start this sample to mark out 1/4 inch on all sides of the fabric. You can use the edge of the presser foot or the line that indicates where the edge of the fabric is, making sure that you keep the needle in the fabric as you position in and out of the corners. When you get to the end, you'll backstitch and then clip your threads as close to the base of the fabric as possible. Next, you'll head over to the iron and take a pair of scissors to clip the corners of the 2 edges where your seams meet. This will reduce bulk and make it easier for you to turn the corners. Now you're going to be using a pressing tool that is specifically for collars, cuffs, and different points. And you'll be opening up your seams flat, and then you're going to press them. Now note that there's a little bit of fusible interfacing on one side, so I'm going to be really careful not to get my iron on that. However, now I'm going to show you how you can turn this around and use a press cloth in order to make sure that you don't get any glue onto your iron when you're pressing this. In the event that you do get glue onto your iron, you can use a wonderful product that's called Iron Off in order to remove the glue from the iron. Now I'm going to sort of press open the seam with my fingers, and then I'm going to take that press cloth and I'm going to press the seam flat. It's really helpful to press the seam flat while the piece is inside out so that you can make sure that your corners and your edges are really nice and crisp. I've just rotated the piece around and I'm going to be pressing the other side of the cuff. Use the press cloth, and then you're going to press that seam open. Next, you'll go to the last side, the last small edge of your cuff. You're going to finger press this open, just kind of smooth it out with your fingers. And then if you need a press cloth, you can put the press cloth over that piece if you see any of that white fusible interfacing, and press it flat. Next, you're going to turn the fabric right side out, and then you're going to retrieve a tool to help us get those corners out nice and sharp. You're going to be using something called a point turner, it looks like this, in order to push the points out on those edges so that they're really crisp and sharp. You can also use a chopstick, the end of a mechanical pencil, things like that, but you want to be gentle to make sure that you don't poke the fabric. And then you're going to press the cuff flat. After you've done that, you can be done with the sample, or feel free to top stitch around the edge, the 3 edges of the fabric using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you've now completed your cuffs that have fusible interfacing.